Hey guys, we're here at part two. Here with Brian. We just got the overlook of what's going on with the construction of Centennial Yards. We're gonna dive in a little bit more on who you are, Brian, and your background and what's led you to kind of getting the reins on such a big project. And would love to. You've had quite a background. I remember hearing your bio for the first time. Believe Invest Atlanta is in your background, Beltline,
Sure.
Schwarzenegger's administration, and then Obama. And so give us the play-by-play. How did you end up here? And
Well, I ask myself that sometimes. How did I end up here? This job feels like a capstone project in my career in a way because I'm using all the different skills and experiences I've had in all those great experiences and jobs I've had in the past. So it kind of feels like everything is coming to use in making Centennial Yards happen, large part because, Centennial Yards, we describe it often as we're building a city within a city. So everything from, infrastructure, creating and running a big organization to actually execute on a mission or a vision, to affordable housing and community engagement and marketing and all the things I did in my career, mostly as an economic developer, kind of apply here. So, and then the jobs that I had in Atlanta, obviously, from Invest Atlanta and the Beltline, I had an existing very strong network already here. I knew all the people and players, and I think, because we successfully executed on things when I was in those jobs or those two organizations, that built a confidence and a trust, in who I am and how much I believe and love Atlanta. So it's like I didn't have to sell myself beyond that. I think when I took this job, people knew that I'm going to get it done. That's what I do, and I'm going to make sure that it's done in the right way for Atlanta. Because my first love is for the city of Atlanta. So I want to make sure that what we're doing and how we're doing it and what it eventually ends up becoming is something that all Atlantans are very proud of.
Yeah. Well, good. Yeah. And when did you join the project? What year was that?
I've been here coming up on 4 years in this upcoming May. So do the math. 20.
It's pretty quick.
Yeah. Yes.
And it's right in the middle of COVID too.
It was right at the end of COVID. So COVID had just kind of, people were just getting back to work. So
got it.
And I joke that I kind of feel like I was born on third base a little bit there because the real hard work was, as I mentioned earlier, that getting the incentives in place, acquiring the property, creating the master plan and the vision, and selling it and raising some equity for it, and then I showed up to execute. Yeah. So again, it's big things like this don't happen without a lot of people involved. So this is a public-private partnership. So the only way any city in America is going to get something big like this done is it has to be through a public-private partnership. So again, my background in government I think it really enables me to understand both sides of the equation, the private sector and the public sector.
Yeah. What were you doing for the Schwarzenegger administration?
I was Deputy Secretary of Commerce. So the state of California doesn't have a Department of Economic Development. So I was the lead economic development person for the state of California, which at the time was the 5th or 6th largest economy in the world. I think it still is. Actually, it is. Not I think. And my job was to attract investment and market California, everything from tourism to filming to biotech and technology and foreign direct investment, attracting companies to the state of California to continue growing that economy. So
And how did you get introduced to them? That job?
Yeah, good question. Yeah. I was actually working at the time for the county of San Bernardino. So I ran the economic development agency for the county of San Bernardino, which is one of the largest counties in the United States. I had 300 or 400 people, everything from affordable housing to redevelopment. And got a call from the Schwarzenegger administration that the governor wanted to lead a trade mission to China. And up to that point, I had done probably a dozen trade missions to China in previous jobs. And they were successful. The New York Times actually wrote an article about these trade missions, and the title of the article was long. It was "Trade Missions That Do More Than Just See the Great Wall," because at the time there were a lot of governors and mayors going to China to try to attract investment and help companies export, and they tended to looked like junkets. I made sure that ours was not. So I would tell, we'd recruit businesses to come with us, and I would tell them, look, if you want to see the Great Wall of China, don't come with us, because we are going to make you work the entire week. And it was all about matchmaking. So the governor's office had heard about that, and so they called and asked if they could borrow me to help with that aspect of the trade mission. So I did that and established a relationship with him, and then about a year later they called and said, why don't you come up here and work for us?
Evolve. I know we're going kind of in backwards order. I mean, the connection to California, like why were you over there in San Bernardino, and how'd you end up there?
So I grew up in New York and New Jersey. So I was born in the Bronx and graduated high school on the Jersey Shore, Toms River High School East. And a year prior to my senior year, my family had moved to the Coachella Valley, Palm Desert, California, because my father, who's from the Bronx, his two sisters had moved there. My two aunts had moved there. And they started businesses and became successful. One owned a series of restaurants in Palm Desert. One was called McGowan's Irish Inn, and 4 or 5 other restaurants. So they became successful, convinced their brother to move. And so my senior year in high school, my family was in California, and I was living with a friend to just finish my senior year.
Got it.
So clearly I graduated high school, and then I moved to Palm Desert, California. So you had this kid from New Jersey suddenly in Palm Desert, California.
Yeah, quite the
It's
jump.
like landing on Mars.
Yeah, I literally, it was like just saying.
Everything was different.
Is McGowan still around?
No, she's retired now. So
okay, got it.
Yeah, the restaurant's gone, sadly.
But darn, well, good run.
Yeah, it was a good run.
So you graduate, you move over to the desert, and then what was your first job?
So I went to UC Riverside, University of California, Riverside, and my senior year I did an internship with the city of Palm Springs, California. I say California because I think East Coasters think Palm Springs, Florida. And Sonny Bono was our congressman at the time. You probably don't even know who Sonny Bono is. Well, some of the people watching know. He was married to Cher, so Sonny and Cher.
There you go.
But he was our former mayor, and he was a congressman at the time. So I interned with the city of Palm Springs in the Department of Economic Development. Didn't even know what economic development was, but it was this cool academic internship opportunity. And at the end of the internship, they offered me a job. So that was my first job out of college. I worked for the city of Palm Springs, California.
Did you always have kind of an affinity for like public sector work?
Definitely, yeah. Okay. That was always my drive. So part of that I think comes from, I'm a part of a big Irish immigrant family. My mother is Irish and immigrated here. My father's parents are both Irish immigrants. My grandfather's name's on the wall at Ellis Island, and it's where he came through. My grandmother came through Philadelphia. My mother came through JFK Airport in 1963. So I think being part of an immigrant family, either you're going to become a cop or a fireman, like in New York City. That was kind of a normal, and I have a lot of relatives who are cops and firemen. I have a son who's a fireman, in fact. Or you start your own business, or you go into government service. And, I, as a very proud, patriotic American, I felt like I wanted to serve my community. So I kind of have this public servant heart in me that I will never go away.
Yeah. Got it. Okay, so that explains the California background.
Yeah.
So you kind of work your way up, get with the Schwarzenegger administration, and then where do we go from? How do we get
do that jump?
How do we get to Atlanta?
Well, then I went to the Obama administration.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah. So
how old were you at that point?
Oh my God, I was probably 37, 38. I have to do the math. Don't hold me to that.
Mid-30s, and
So I was in Sacramento and obviously working for the governor, and we were in a recession. Yeah. And I wasn't a volunteer or did anything on the Obama campaign. I was working for a governor at the time, and that was a full-time job.
Yeah.
He's one of the hardest working people you'll ever meet in your life, Arnold Schwarzenegger. But I remember I was living in Southern California, and I'd have to fly to Sacramento like every week. And so I was in I would stay at a hotel, and the hotel I would stay at is called the Citizen Hotel. It was across the street from my office building. And Barack Obama had gotten elected, and it was his inaugural speech. So I left my office to go to my hotel room so I could watch the speech. You know? Again, I knew who he was, but I didn't follow him too closely. So I watched the speech, and the speech was about, we're in this economic crisis. That has to be the number one priority, is to figure out how do we get out of it. And he made a comment. He goes, I don't want Americans to have to grow up in a world where China is number one and America is not. Some comment like that.
Yeah.
And at that point, I knew at some point I wanted to advance, from that state level to the federal level. I always figured I'd be in Washington, D.C. at some point in my career. And it was like, that was the moment. I was like, I'm an economic developer. I care about job creation. I care about workforce development. I care about economic inequality.
Yeah.
If there's ever a time, this is the time to try to get over there. So I went back to my office, and this is another interesting story. The CEO of Invest Atlanta, Eloisa Clementich, was working for me at the time in Sacramento.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I walked into her office, and I said, I want to get a job in the Obama administration. Like, how do you get jobs, like, as a presidential appointee?
Where do you start? It's not
She pulls out a
LinkedIn.
piece of paper, which I think she might still have.
Yeah.
And we started doing like a diagram of like, who do we know that might know somebody that might know somebody? And we literally drew it out.
Yeah.
And next day I started making phone calls and popping resumes out. And then, long story short, probably 4 or 5 months later, after giving up, I got a phone call to fly to Washington, D.C. to interview with the Secretary of Commerce for a job.
Wow. We say after giving up. So you
I hadn't heard anything, and so I was like,
Wow.
well, it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
And then we're actually on a camping trip with my family, my kids, and I didn't answer the phone. And so, I think we were packing up the campsite. I get in the car and I play it back, and it says, this is so-and-so from the White House. We'd like to talk to you about, maybe coming to Washington, D.C. next week to interview for a job.
Wow.
So I remember I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And so I played it for my wife, and I was like, does this sound real?
Yeah.
She's like, yeah, it sounds real, because I thought maybe one of my friends were pranking me or something. I literally, that thought went through my mind.
Wow.
And so, a week later, I was sitting in the Secretary of Commerce's office and interviewing for a job. Yeah.
Wow.
Which was great. I mean, it was an amazing experience.
It was.
I was Deputy Assistant Secretary, Chief Operating Officer for the U.S. Economic Development Administration.
Okay.
And
what did day-to-day look like in that role? Was it a lot of traveling?
So we ran, a lot of traveling and speeches and things like that all over the country. But we were running a grant agency. So it's an agency that not only provides dollars for natural disasters, so flooding and tornadoes, and we help rebuild the local economy. Yeah. But we also would incentivize innovation hubs across America. So like Georgia Tech, Tech Square was a recipient of some of our funding.
Yeah.
And so, it was administering a large federal agency and testifying and, doing that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I was there I think I was there for about a year. I have to do the math again on that. But I got a call from Secretary Locke and his office, and they said, Secretary wants to meet with you this afternoon at 2 o'clock or something like that.
You said,
I was like, what did I do?
Yeah.
Like, darn it. I'm
Yeah.
going to get fired. It's very scary if the Secretary of Commerce wants to meet with you. And I only met him that one time I interviewed with him. And then I had seen him, around the building. So I went up, and the Secretary says the White House called a couple days ago, and they're looking for someone to run the economic solutions team in the National Incident Command that was set up to respond to the BP oil spill. So I was like, oh, wow, that sounds like, say that again? It was this long,
Yeah.
And he goes, is that something you would be interested in doing? And I said, well, what is it?
Yeah.
He says that wasn't the question. You know, he says, do you want to do it or not? I need to let them know today. And so the answer was, yes, I'll do it. Had no idea what it was or what I was doing.
Wow.
And
Wow.
then I was probably on a Monday, and then I already had a top secret clearance, and I had to get another layer of clearance because every Friday there was a meeting in the Situation Room with all the National Incident Command people, and I had to be in that meeting that following Friday. So it was just this really great, extraordinary opportunity from the perspective of, you know, technically on paper I'm reporting, you know, directly to the office of the president, and my job was to help communities along the Gulf mitigate the impacts of the oil spill. Okay. So I could reach into any federal agency I wanted and get resources to help small businesses and people and families along the Gulf, from Galveston, Texas to Bay County, Florida. So this huge swath of geography. And
were you still out of DC there?
I was, yeah. Okay. I was flying to the Gulf every week. Oh, wow. I was in New Orleans or someplace in Florida.
Yeah. You had a big family at that time.
Yeah, big family, and it was. My wife is amazing. 5 sons, so she was handling that, and I was. Anybody who was working on the oil spill at that time, you were working 24/7. Like there was just,
that was the biggest story.
There was a constant. Like I think people forget how scary it was at the time. Like people didn't know. Like it took a long time to cap the well, so oil's gushing, and so it was the uncertainty. It was really affecting tourism and the oil industry and fisheries. And my job was to kind of figure out how do you mitigate the what were going to be deep, long-term impacts to the economy in that.
Which it was, the stories were so doom and gloom. It was like, this is the end of the Gulf, and
they were, you remember.
And you got it cleaned up.
Yeah, they got it cleaned up, and you know, one thing I noticed, like I was down, I can't remember what part of the Florida Panhandle I was on, but we were having lunch near a beach, and we walked out onto the beach, and you notice like these oil globules, but they weren't all over. I think people thought like the beaches were just all the sand was covered with oil.
Yeah,
right?
We've all seen the images of seagulls like covered in oil. Like fly.
Yeah, and that wasn't the case. So like you'd have to find them.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like they were all over the place. You'd have to hunt for one, and you're like, oh, there's an oil globule that came in probably from. But a lot of that's naturally occurring too. There's natural that happens, but. You know, the big thing for us was we wanted to make sure people knew that it was safe to go to the Gulf and swim. So my team, we convinced the president to get on an airplane and fly to the Gulf, and he ended up bringing one of his daughters with him and swim in the ocean. Because I had just seen him do that in Hawaii. He had these pictures of the president swimming in the surf in Hawaii, and I'm like, oh, maybe he'd do that in the Gulf. And so I suggested it to him, and he agreed. And went down and swam in the Gulf, and then the next day that was the front page of like newspapers all over the world. You know,
it's a good publicity.
It was a good publicity. That's right. Yeah. But the effort, it was amazing because the first time I've ever been part of moving a president in the Air Force One and everything. But that lift for literally, we landed at an Air Force base. We motorcaded to the beach. He got in with his daughter. They swam. Got back in the car, he went back to Air Force One and flew out. Wow. So it's like this huge effort, but we noticed an uptick and almost an immediate uptick in tourism after that. So it worked.
The coast is clear.
It worked. The coast is clear.
Yeah. Okay, wow. So that how long was that project for? Was that like a year or two?
I was there. No, I did that for probably 9 or 10 months.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I went back to my regular job running the U.S. Economic Development Administration.
Yeah.
But at that time, it was, you mentioned earlier, 5 sons. I had another one who was heading to college at the time, and those jobs don't pay a lot. I think people don't realize that, but to be a presidential appointee, you're not going to get rich doing that. And my wife was like, it's going to be, we're having a hard time making the ends meet.
Yeah.
And so I was like, it's probably time to go try to find a real job. And then somebody at that time told me that Atlanta had this young, new, rising star mayor named Kasim Reed. Somebody in the White House told me this. And because I was letting people know it's probably time for me to go. If anybody hears of any jobs, let me know.
Yeah.
And this person said she believed that this new mayor in Atlanta was looking for somebody to run his Economic Development Authority. So I figured it out, got in touch with the headhunter,
Make another map.
Got the job. Just, who do I know that might know somebody?
Yeah.
And I just filled out the application, threw it in, along with some others in other parts of the country. I knew some other mayors, the mayor of New Orleans, Mitchell Andrew, and so I had options, but this seemed like the best. You know, I not from the South, had never lived in Atlanta, but had tons of respect for Atlanta and its civil rights history and the Olympics and all of its Fortune 500 companies and all this. So, so I applied and I ended up getting the job. So that's how I ended up in Atlanta. It was a long way to it, but
yeah. What year was that?
2011.
2011. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was the CEO of the Atlanta Development Authority. So that's what it was called at that point.
You didn't have the rebrand yet.
I rebranded it.
They
I
did,
renamed it. Yeah.
We need a simpler name.
I renamed it. I thought Atlanta Development Authority sounded scary. You know, for
you're gonna get
it's
like
authority.
some
Like I'm trying to attract companies here, and I come from the authority.
Right.
It didn't. But the other thing is, everyone called it the ADA. So people who were in Atlanta around then know. And the ADA to me was the
American
or the American Dental Association, or Assistant District Attorney. So many other terms. I was like, we needed a new name.
Yeah, on every front.
It also needed a refresh. It was an It was actually insolvent when I got here in 2011.
Yeah.
So we had, I think, $6 or $8 million in debt that was due and payable that we had no way to pay back.
Yeah.
And so my first job was to stabilize it.
Yeah.
And negotiate that debt with the banks. You know. And then we had to rethink the mission and personnel. We renamed it, we rebranded it, we moved from underground to the Georgia Pacific building. We did all.
You were in downtown at that time.
Yeah. Well, we still were. We went to the Georgia Pacific building, but we were above the underground. Yeah. But it was really hard to sell Atlanta from that location at that time. You know, because I remember one day we're coming up on St. Patrick's Day, but we had a delegation of Irish members of Parliament that were visiting our offices. And I remember looking out my office window and I could see them. They had arrived. I was just happened to be looking out the window and I see this delegation. It was probably 8 or 10 people. And they're walking across the street, and right adjacent to our front door was a police precinct. And they were transporting prisoners at that time. So the sidewalk was lined with people in handcuffs, and these Irish members of Parliament had to kind of get around them and get into our front door.
Welcome to Atlanta.
I was like, I don't think this is a great place to sell Atlanta as a place for investment. We need to move. And Mayor Reed supported that. And he supported the name change and all of that. So
it's good. Yeah. That was a good effort.
And we turned it around, and Invest Atlanta under Eloisa Clementich's leadership is doing really well. You know, it's a very capable organization. It generates fees. It's generating affordable housing and investment attraction. So it really turned a corner. I think that organization, she really took it to the next level.
Yeah. It's quite the powerhouse. I mean, there's a lot of really good projects going on. Okay, so Invest Atlanta, rebrand, kind of re-steering the ship, and then Beltline was right after that.
Yeah, I had a couple of other short stints. I went to right after that. I went to the Chamber, so I was the Executive Vice President, Chief Operating Officer for the Metro Atlanta Chamber. Okay. Which at the time needed a refresh as well. Sam Williams had left, and so there was this. They hired Hala Mogg as the new CEO, and she hired me, and we kind of started looking at the finances and its vision and mission and things, as all organizations need a refresh every once in a while. And leadership change is usually the right time to do that. Yeah. And so we did that. We went through, we looked at all the people, processes, and policies that were in place and how the organization was running. And as there's always room for improvement, we tightened things up, and we sold the building, and then we moved to 191. And so I did that, and then when that was done, my background tends to be like, I like to go in and either create something new or fix something broken. That's kind of what gets me up in the morning. So that was done. I went to Denton's, a law firm, for a little while in the public policy practice,
which we toured this week.
Oh, you did? It's probably empty, huh?
I was a little quiet. Yeah, but the top floors are
gorgeous.
amazing.
Aren't they amazing?
You get out of the elevator, it's like
Yeah.
25-foot ceilings
Yeah.
on the top of a
Yeah.
high rise. Like,
And the law library, did you take?
yeah. We did the whole thing.
Really
Yeah,
beautiful.
There's
yeah.
there's
I love that
yeah.
building. That's a
it's amazing.
a Portman design building. So it's a gorgeous.
Yeah,
building.
amazing views, and I mean, there was this room probably the size of this room with just couches on the top floor.
Yeah.
Just
yeah.
like,
There's
They've
a
been
whole
paid
conference
$1
center
million
up there.
in rent.
Yeah,
on like
yeah. It's a
a
whole.
sofa.
There's a
like,
whole conference center up there. Like all these little conference rooms, big conference rooms, and things like that. So I was in the public policy practice. So I'm in the private sector for pretty much the first time in my career, enjoying it. And then I got a call from Mayor Reed saying there's a problem at the Beltline. At the time, there was a AJC intensive look. I think it was over a 6-month period about how the Beltline wasn't meeting its affordable housing obligations primarily. I don't know if you remember any of this, but it was on the front page of the AJC. And so after 6 months of beatings, Mayor Reed called me and said, I'm going to have to make a leadership change there. Would you be interested? And so I said yes, with the caveat that I will promise you 1 year and not beyond that. I might stay longer, but if after a year I leave, don't be mad at me. And part of that was, that's another entity that needed a real kind of shaking to rethink it and think about leadership and messaging and goals and why it seemed to be moving very slow at the time. That was my observation from the outside. So went into the Beltline and did the same thing, kind of new vision, mission, personnel changes. I think the big thing about the Beltline at the time, I remember I met with my first all hands meeting. I think I was there 3 days, and I said something that unexpectedly created a lot of pushback amongst the employees, which was, I said, it's our job to work ourselves out of our jobs. And I thought everybody recognized that the TAD actually expires, and the Beltline, there's a completion date.
Yeah. It's literally a circle.
You finish it.
Build it, move on.
But I think culturally, I don't think they really saw it that way, So I think that's what led to kind of this lack of urgency, and then there was a lack of focus on affordable housing, which we changed immediately, obviously, at the mayor's direction. We changed the way we counted affordable units, because at the time, they could only be counted if they were in the TAD. They had to be inside the boundaries of the tax allocation district.
Okay, which is pretty
some
tight.
parts of the Beltline, it's just that literal Beltline. So there's huge swaths of the Beltline, like miles, where. If you incentivize an affordable unit right next to the Beltline, you can't count it if it's not in the TAD. So we changed it to include this an overlay district. So if it was within I can't remember the exact distance, but
1,000 feet.
It was more than that. But that then really allowed us to use our incentive dollars to get developers to do things in other parts of the Beltline that we couldn't do prior to that. So the numbers started going up very quickly. And under Clyde Higgs, and he was my chief operating officer when I was there, who's an amazing leader. Matter of fact, you should do this with him. He's a fascinating person. He's really taken that leadership reign, and I think they're ahead of their goals, and they're very focused on finishing. And so the organization needed a refocus.
Got it. So that was a full year? What happened? Did you
I
stay on
was
longer?
there I happened to be there for about a year, and then I got a call out of the blue from the former Secretary of Commerce, Gary Locke, who was the former governor of the state of Washington. And the governor after him, her name is Christine Gregoire, who I knew her daughter. She worked at the Department of Commerce as well. They both called and said, we're creating a new regional economic development organization in the Seattle region. And do you want to come and do that?
And build it or fix it. And
build it or fix it. So I was like, yeah, that sounds great. And I'm a non-resident fellow at the Brookings Institute. And I've always been fascinated by the Seattle region because they punch way above their weight for a region of 4 million people. They're the 10th largest economy in America.
Wow.
But they also have these $1 trillion companies and multiples, not one, but they have like 3 or 4. So I was always fascinated by what's in the water there? How does that, why, So, and it's a beautiful part of the country, and I mountain bike and we wakeboard and we hike and we love all that stuff. So we was like, my wife's so fantastic. She's like, let's go do it. So my deal there was 3 years. I told them I'll sign a 3-year contract. I guarantee you I'll stay for 3 years and get this thing off the ground and launched. And after it's off the ground and launched, probably not my job at that point.
Go fix something else.
But it's called Greater Seattle Partners, and it still exists, and it's doing very well. And then I got a call from CIM. Wasn't
Wow.
I knew at the time my wife and I were in Seattle during COVID, and I think that's when we started realizing as beautiful it is in Seattle, we really miss Atlanta. We both kind of had this moment of truth with each other, like, do you wish we were back in Atlanta? And she's like, yeah, and I go, I do too.
Yeah.
So I think we were in Seattle probably about 1.5 years. Then COVID hit. A year and a half before we realized that I think we want to be back in Atlanta. Then COVID hit, and that really kind of made us realize, like, we need to go home.
Yeah.
So I started letting people in Atlanta know, close friends, that I was looking for something. And one of my friends, his name is KP Reddy. I don't know if you know KP, but he's a serial entrepreneur in Atlanta that did very well for himself. He was doing some consulting work for CIM Group on Centennial Yards. And he calls me one day, I'm in Seattle, working from home, and he says, hey, I was in a meeting with the CIM guys today. They were asking me questions that I couldn't answer, and I told them they really should talk to an economic developer to answer those questions. And he says, would you be willing to talk to him? And I was like, yeah, sure, of course.
Yeah.
So I jump on a Teams Zoom call with them, whatever, and they're asking me tons of questions. An hour into the conversation, I'm looking at my watch, and to end the conversation, I said, look, I'm going to be in Atlanta in about 3 weeks. I have a niece who lived here who's getting married. So if you want to meet again, just let me know. So that was fine. Figured I'd never hear from them again. A couple weeks later, they called. They said, when are you going to be in Atlanta? We'd like to meet with you again. So while I was here on that trip, I met with them right here in this office. There used to be a conference room right there. And they asked me more questions. And then at the end of it, they said, we're looking for a president of Centennial Yards, somebody to run this. Is that something you'd be interested in? And my answer was, hell yeah, I would be interested.
Cool.
Yeah.
Was there anybody else in the running, or was it?
No. That was I was the only candidate at the time. Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah. So it was great, and
yeah.
And being back here for almost 4 years now, it's as I think everybody knows, this is truly a transformational project for Atlanta.
It is.
I think that word is probably overused in real estate. Not in this case, just because of the sheer size of it and the importance of the location. More great things to come. Like we kind of feel like we're just getting started, although we have 6 buildings under construction, 1 complete. But this year we'll announce more buildings and more leases, and my job is to actually accelerate as much as people here say we're going as fast as we can. It's like we got to go faster. Like we got to go harder. We got to go faster. So our goal for this year and next is to really push the envelope on speed.
Yeah. Are you able to share any about like the tax incentives, or do y'all have any sunset for the city is giving you?
Yeah. So it's 18 years. So it's a tax. Okay. It's a property tax, a portion of the property tax rebate for 18 years, and then the sales tax rebate, which comes from the state, is for 28 years.
Okay.
So.
Time is of the essence.
Time is of the essence. As a matter of fact, every time I look out that window, I think of how much money I'm losing. that there's not buildings generating property value, or
probably hurts.
Or sales tax being generated.
Yeah.
I have somebody here who actually did the calculation, and I don't want to. No, I don't want to even think like that. Yeah. But it's definitely a motivator, and in fact, the World Cup is a great motivator, I think, for all of downtown. And everyone says, well, we shouldn't be doing things for World Cup. We're clearly not doing this for World Cup, but deadlines are good, right? Yes. So it causes people to do things they wouldn't otherwise have done, just simply for priority reasons. So if you can get the revitalization of downtown prioritized at a higher level, which frankly it has never been, and since I've been here since 2011, and suddenly we have this moment in time where everybody's focused because we're going to have people here from 16 countries for a period of a month, and everyone wants to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward. Right. It's a great deadline to get things done fast. Yeah, helps with permitting. It helps with everything.
Yeah. I want to ask, so you've given us a pretty good I guess, storyline of your background, a lot of public sector stuff.
Yeah.
You're now getting into more private sector, like
Yeah,
real
very
estate
much.
stuff.
Yeah.
Like, okay,
Yeah.
you're starting to, you got to speak
Yeah.
real estate, you got to deal with,
Yeah.
you know, kind of different headspace. Like how is that, I don't know, the culmination of these two worlds?
Yeah, it was a big challenge. And it
Yeah.
was a concern of mine, coming into the job thinking, well, I have a lot to learn, which I did, but I also have run large organizations, and anybody who runs a large organization knows that you don't have to be an expert in everything.
Mm-hmm.
You just you need to be able to hire people who are experts in those things, and make sure you hire really good people, and that the overall vision and expectations are clear to everybody in the organization. I have done that many, many times, and I even think in that second conversation with somebody at CIM, when they asked me if I'd be interested, my initial reaction was almost to sell against myself. Like, well, I'm not a leasing expert, I'm not a construction expert, but then I realized, well, of course, like when I went to the Beltline, I wasn't a Beltline expert. When I went to the federal government, I didn't know anything about the federal government. You figure it out, you learn it and figure it out, and you learn it and figure it out quickly if you have good people around you. And I think I have a very proud of the fact that I've been able to hire really good people around me in every job I've ever had, and that's what I've done. But the great thing about it, I think the greatest thing about it is I think when I was considering taking the job, I was talking to a good friend of mine from the Obama administration and about this topic, and he goes, well, look at it this way, you're going to get a master's and PhD in real estate, over the next couple of years. So yeah. I do remember in the first year sitting in meetings where I'm literally taking notes because I don't know what they're talking about. Yeah. And then I'm Googling it, or I'm calling friends saying, what does this mean? And what is that term? Again, I've always been in real estate, with the Beltline and Invest Atlanta, but not on the private sector side. So it's a different view. It's a P&L we're operating here, and government it isn't. Yeah. And so I was familiar enough, that it wasn't like a foreign language. But there, as you know, in your world and CRE world, there's a lot of terminology, and there's lots of other pieces and parts that you need to understand in order to run a project like this. So, whenever you start a new job like this, I always tell people, it usually takes 2 or 3 years to kind of feel like you have your legs solidly under you. Yeah. So it took me, it was right in that period of between 2 and 3 years. I'm coming up on my 4th year, where I finally felt like I knew enough about everything to make it work well. Remember, we're also, part of a large company which is based out of Los Angeles, and you have to understand how it works in order to make it work for Centennial Yards Company. Because Centennial Yards Company is basically a subsidiary of CIM Group.
It's a company
I'm
within
the president of it. It's a company within a company, and so you have to have those relationships and understand their processes and procedures. And we have to hire a bunch of people here and create a vision, mission, core values, and sets of goals, and renew those goals every year. And I feel so good about this job right now because we have the most amazing people working for us. Yeah. Like, I'm convinced, it's a joke, but I tell people, you almost have to, I have to be careful what I tell our construction development people, because if I tell them to do it, they will do it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I was like, where that really struck me was we had to chop off a big chunk of the CNN deck in order to make room for the entertainment district. And we stood on that piece with our head of construction, a guy named Brandon Dexter, and he said, he stood there and he looked back at us and he goes, in a month from now, where we're standing, we'll be gone, And my heart rate went up, both out of like, oh my God, but also the excitement of, I can't wait till this gets chopped off, because it's going to show Atlanta that we're really moving, like we're doing it. Yeah. But you give those guys a deadline, and they're
I met Brandon. Yeah, he gave us.
They're going to hit them. Yeah.
He's great.
These are people that if I told them I want you to build me a rocket ship to go to Mars in 2 years, they'd probably figure out how to do it.
Like in 2 months.
They would do it. They'd say, 2 months. Well, how about 2 months?
Yeah. Wow. I want to ask you. So you've had a lot of roles, and you've shared a little bit of how these roles have come about. But like, do you have any advice for people that are growing in their career, and like, how did you find mentors that helped you get to different levels and all that? Like, you have a track record. Like, how does somebody replicate this? I don't know.
Well, I mean, don't ever undervalue the importance of relationships. I think you're very good at that. In fact, building trusting relationships, true, authentic relationships, not just transactional relationships, but friendships with people is really critical because, for example, KP Reddy, who I mentioned earlier, he's a close personal friend of mine. And I don't know that he would have called me and said, you should talk to CIM if we weren't close personal friends. If we were just transactional friends, he may not have done that because it was his reputation on the line as well. So I think the value of networking is important. And I think for young people in Atlanta, you couldn't be in a better place for that. I'm telling you that from somebody who's lived and worked in other major cities across the United States. They're not all like Atlanta in that you have access here that you will not have in places like Seattle. Like you're not going to run into the CEO of Microsoft or Amazon in Seattle, but you could run into the CEO of Delta,
Georgia Pacific.
They show up, they're accessible, or a mayor or a former mayor or Ambassador Andy Young. Like these people are actually accessible to young people here because Atlanta is like it did for me. It embraced me. So I was worried, well, I'm not from the South, and people are going to look at me like, what does this guy know about Atlanta culture? No, that wasn't the case at all. It was they hugged me, they brought me in. If I got knocked down or tripped up, they'd lift me up. Like Atlanta's a very welcoming place. We say, Southerners are friendly and all that, but Atlanta's different. It's a place that wants to be bigger, better, more. And I think Atlanta inherently knows that the only way you get that is by welcoming the best and the brightest into the fold. And so like if you're a young person, you can be a part of shaping this city's future, whereas that is not the case in most cities in America. You're a young person and you show up in San Francisco or LA or you name the city, it's going to be very difficult for you to integrate and be part of driving the city to where it wants to be, but not in this city.
Wow.
So network and get out there, watch what's happening, get involved.
Yeah, it's a great perspective. Okay, question. We have a lot of people in the commercial real estate industry that watch these videos and are kind of in our audience and the business community. What can they do to help support what's going on? Is there
so there's a couple of things. Number one, be very clear and aware that we are building this thing. So when I got here, there was a lot of, rightfully so, after...
Yeah, there's a lot of promises.
There was a lot of promises.
I remember meeting with one of your team members, and he pulled out his iPad, showed me all his renderings, and it's like, this is happening. This is really...
But I think for a long time, people didn't see activity in buildings. That's changed. We're going fast. So know that, share that with your friends, family, neighbors. Let them know that the Centennial Yards is happening. That's number one. Number two, we have a very aggressive equal business opportunity goal. So 38% of our contractors will be minority female business enterprises. So that's 38% of a big number. So there's tremendous opportunity for small businesses, female-owned, minority-owned businesses to do work with us. So right now, our current numbers, we're at 31%, which we're very proud of. The city's goal is 38%, so we match that. So if you're a business owner and you can do something that will help us build that, you should reach out to us because we need help. It's going to take a lot of people, a village to build this project. And in that space, we're going to need a lot more subcontractors to help us get this done.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Okay. What are you most excited about So let's wind the clock. If 8 years from now, it's all up and going. Where are you hanging out? Like, what's your favorite spot? For me, success 8 years from now is you're sitting in the middle of Centennial Yards and you're getting a really true uniquely Atlanta experience while you're there. So Atlanta food and music and culture and art, like you should be sitting in the middle of Centennial Yards looking around going, only in Atlanta could I see this combination of stuff. Like it's very easy, these sports adjacent entertainment districts to be cookie cutter, right? Yeah.
So you go to, I've been to several across the country. It's like, there's that sports bar. It's in every one. There's that hat store. There's that
Yeah.
sculpture thing, whatever, fan zone. Like they're all kind of the same.
Yeah.
I can guarantee you ours will not. Ours is going to be rooted in Atlanta culture and history, and will be something that everybody in this region is going to be proud of when they come downtown. And it will be our Times Square essentially. So if you go to New York City as a tourist for the first time, you have to go to Times Square and get your selfie with something behind you to tell all your friends you're in New York.
Yeah.
Anybody who comes to Atlanta will want to be in Centennial Yards for that reason. To be able to say, like, I went to the heart of the region. I experienced Atlanta culture. Like I felt like I was in Atlanta. That's our goal.
That's it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right. What's your take on the office market as it pertains to Centennial Yards? Is it like, hey, we're going to focus heavily on this entertainment district, kind of get the apartments, get the retail going, and then be pleasantly surprised if we add office, or where's your head on that?
So we will add office. Office will be a part of Centennial Yards. It always has been, always will be.
Yeah.
In fact, right after I guess within a year of me taking this job, every tech company that you can name walked through that door, right? They were interested.
I heard y'all were close.
We were. There was a couple of really cool things.
Yeah.
But maybe it was a good thing in that a lot of those companies were having a hard time getting their head around looking out the window at the Gulch in its former form, which was sort of dead and not welcoming, not inviting, no place to go to lunch, no place to live. So that pause actually caused us, I think, did us a favor. Now we really switched and focused on the actual placemaking. So let's create the apartments. Let's put the restaurants and the bars and the coffee shops and the things for people to do. And then that then will help us attract tech companies when they start needing office space again, which they're going to need.
Or graduating from South Downtown.
Yeah. Or graduate, seriously. We're so thrilled by David and John's work down there. We think it's because it all works so well together. Very different products. But so CIM's take on office is that it will come back, and we're beginning to see that. People are getting back to Jamie Dimon and the federal government, people getting back to the office. But we do believe there'll be a flight to quality, which means, older buildings like the one we're in are probably going to struggle a bit. And there'll be some big adjustments in the market. But as you know, companies have natural growth rates. What had happened prior from the work from home is companies all probably had too much office space because they were anticipating future growth. So they were acquiring office space even though they didn't need it, just expecting that our natural growth rate will fill in that space. And then the work from home then caused all these companies to kind of like, let's shed that extra space because it's just a drag on the balance sheet or whatever. So they sold that off, or they repositioned it, or they sublet it, whatever. But their growth rate typically continued. So these things are going to catch up at some point. So when you get everybody back into the office, and I think it'll be gradual, not like the federal government, it was everybody's back in office, but I think it'll be like come back to the office 2 days a week, and then it's 3 days a week, and then finally it'll be 5 days a week, and probably 3 years from now, you'll see this new higher demand for office space, but it's going to be the newer office space. So we have a Class A office building designed, 520,000 square feet. We're actively marketing that, and that's a building we will build as soon as we can find a tenant.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll bring you somebody.
Help me.
What's your take on the GSA announcement and kind of they're analyzing all the real estate. We have 2 pretty sizable buildings here in downtown.
Yeah.
Like right
well,
next to
I'll answer a different question. Then I'll answer that.
Sure.
I think all this focus on downtown is clearly helped by people coming back to work. So I think federal government workers coming back to work is great for downtown. But I think the county, the city, the state need to do the same thing. So all agencies, all departments should be back to work full time. So if you want to help downtown, let's get those government workers back downtown, going out to lunch, buying flowers, stopping at the dry cleaner, supporting the small businesses who have struggled to stay alive over the past 5 years. So I think that's like an easy thing that government can help kind of do to help our downtown continue to go. It's come back to work. Like, we're full-time back to work. It's time generally, I think, for people to come back to work. So those buildings, I think it's a let's wait and see what happens. There's been a lot of starts and stops out of the Trump administration. It's early in the administration. I think they'll, buildings they might say are for sale now. After they analyze it, they might change their minds. So but we're keeping a close eye on it for obvious reasons.
Sure.
Literally across the street from our property.
Can't
We don't want to see big empty buildings next to Centennial Yards. So it's something we're going to monitor very closely and see what happens.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to ask you, so there's been not only, $5 billion development here, but the city and Georgia State, there's a lot of infrastructure projects that are going on right now, even the Stitch. Do y'all glean any? I know they're repaving a lot of these roads and stuff. How does that affect y'all over here?
Well, I mean, it's great. So, downtown is not only the oldest part of the city, but it's the oldest part of the region. So if any part of the region needs infrastructure dollars, it's downtown Atlanta, right?
Yeah.
We have viaducts that need to be replaced. There's street lights and just general upgrading of everything. So I love what I'm seeing coming out of the mayor's office and all their efforts on resurfacing the streets and pedestrian scrambles and new lights and a two-waying of some streets. There's a lot of efforts around that. It needs that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, our downtown, truthfully, has been neglected for a long time, which really doesn't make sense at the end of the day, considering that there's 20 million people a year from other places come to downtown.
Yeah.
It's like my first time in Atlanta was probably 2003. I came here for a Cornet conference. I forget where it was held. And never been to Atlanta before. I spent my entire time downtown and I left with a bad impression of Atlanta. It was like this. It feels like a city that doesn't care about itself. This was the mantra that went through my head. I admittedly didn't spend time in Midtown or Buckhead, and it was just downtown. But think about that. You have 20 million people a year coming to downtown from all over the world and all over the region, and they don't have a great experience, right? So, there's easy things like, I don't want to say easy. It's hard and expensive, but resurfacing streets, trimming the trees and making sure they're healthy. As a matter of fact, our team did a Trees Atlanta volunteer thing yesterday in South Downtown where we were putting soil around the base of trees along sidewalks and things like that. So we got to save the trees. We need curb cuts to make it more ADA compliant. I think there's things you can do to, like major intersections. You could put LED lighting and paint murals on just to kind of make this is the event central here, right?
Yeah.
This is where people come. It should feel that way when people come down here.
Yeah, give the impression that we've taken care of it.
Yeah, that we're even the streets. If you look at some of the street standards, over the years in any given city, people put posters on them, and then cities typically paint. In some cases, paint. They don't scrape the tape off. They just keep painting over it. And it gets layer and layer, and then it just looks crappy. It's like there's cosmetic things that can be done, and I know are being done. So the city is under the Commissioner of Transportation, Solomon Cavanis. They're doing amazing work around making sure that we look better, present better for World Cup, which is good for the long run and for all the tourists and convention people that come to Atlanta.
Yeah, and I've heard we had to sign a pretty big contract to get the World Cup to come here. It might have been 500 or 600 pages. There's standards.
I'm sure.
Like, hey, y'all have to clean this
FIFA
up.
is not easy to deal with.
No. If we're going to bring
it's
millions of dollars here.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, I've seen different articles come out about possible Amtrak, possible Beltline connection, like transportation. How does that, is that actively in discussion, or do y'all have any plans?
I mean, so on Beltline and streetcar, we often provide our opinions. I know the mayor at the MARTA meeting yesterday made some announcement about not extending the streetcar to the Beltline.
Didn't hear that yet.
Something like
That's
that.
news to me. Wow.
I'd have to read the article more carefully, but I was busy last evening on a couple of events, so I didn't get a chance to read it. But the streetcar was never meant to be what it is today. So I was in the Reid administration. I was on his cabinet when when all those discussions were happening. It was right as I was arriving in Atlanta, and it was always meant to be the first of more. You know, it was like, let's extend it. So whether we're extending it east to the Beltline or west to the Beltline or south to the Beltline, it needs to be extended because in its current form, it's a merry-go-round ride.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't really go anywhere.
Yeah.
You know, so to make it useful, you got to run it north-south and east-west. So obviously, in self-serving, we'd love to see it extended west and out to the AU Center, so that those students can come to Centennial Yards and have that connectivity, and out to the West Side Trail. So like, we would love to see that. We've made our opinion known on that.
Sure.
With regard to Amtrak, we have been in conversations with Amtrak for years now. You know, clearly Amtrak at some point wants to expand service in the Southeast. We've all read the articles about the high-speed train network between cities in the Southeast and all that.
Yeah.
As a government person, I'm not very optimistic that they're going to be able to move at speed on these things, because they just don't. It's just a fact. And we, in our negotiations with Amtrak, we were really trying to come to some kind of an agreement or deal with them if they wanted to use any space in Centennial Yards for a platform. But they really didn't have any money or any authority, in fact, to even do it. But to be good citizens, and at the direction of Mayor Dickens and Senator Ossoff, they asked us both to work with them. And so we have preserved space. We made some adjustments to the entertainment district, in fact, to preserve space for an Amtrak platform underneath the entertainment district at some point in the future.
Wow.
So we didn't want to preclude it, and we had to we had to re-engineer and spend some money to allow that to happen. But if Amtrak is able to get funding and authority, they will be able to put a platform under Centennial Yards.
It's big. Man, I don't know that. Okay, so they've got a right to, you know, expand over. This is really exciting, bro.
Yeah, no, my pleasure.
Yeah,
I love
really.
this. I love talking to you.
Yeah, man, same. I really appreciate the time. This has been
anytime,
great.
of course.
Yeah.